All right. So all of that was wrong and a lie. I fit the demographic. I have a new hip, so the courtesy of the Army. So the marathons are done. Is this too loud? All right. So again, thanks for the introduction. Today we're supposed to talk about setting goals and avoiding injuries. I think everybody in this room has heard the term dad bod before. Your kids look at you and you're like, hey, Dad, what's going on right up in there? There's nothing more embarrassing than when a patient is in the room with you and they turn and they look at you and say, well, Dr. Shaw, you look like you done put on a little bit of weight, huh? Okay, it's about that time that I put down the Twinkies and the Diet Coke and all that good stuff. All right, so again, a little bit about me. I am a team physician for both LSU and now back at Southern. I am a graduate of Southern as an athlete at Southern. I'm also in the Army Reserves. I'm a lieutenant colonel, and unfortunately they put me in charge of a unit in Mobile, Alabama. So I've got all kinds of free time. All right, so one of the things that people want to know is, or you hear the term dad bod. So what is a dad bod? A dad bod is weight gain in that midsection. We all know about that. We all hear about that. I've got that, I got that beer belly. I've got that, I don't want to say anything woefully inappropriate because there we go. That's that extra engine. That's that little cushion. Right now, that extra padding is a little warm because it's a little hot outside. In addition to that, in terms of the dad bod, once we get kind of to our late 30s, early 40s, you start to you've hit that peak and you start to lose some of that muscle mass, some of that bulk that you've built up in your younger days. You also get a decrease in what we call cardiovascular fitness. Your ability to kind of move and your cardiac reserve is a lot less than it was. So if you used to be able to run, 2 miles in X amount of time, it's going to take you a little bit longer, and you're going to get a little bit winded a lot faster. And then this usually occurs in midlife. So late 30s, early 40s, that's when you got the kids. They're starting to get old enough and start looking and start poking you, and they're climbing all over you, and you put yourself to the side to get them to the practices and everything else that goes on. So you start neglecting yourself. So we're talking about goal settings, and we're talking about the dad bod because everybody in here, for the most part, has seen their physician. And you talking to your physician because what's the first thing you do? You come in. One, we make you wait for about 45 minutes because we're running behind, and your pressure gets up and everything like that. And dear God, what's taking them so long to get me to the back? So we get you to the back. First thing we have you do is not check your blood pressure. Is what? Step on that scale. That's right. That is probably the most unnerving thing that you can do to a patient is make them step on that scale, because when you look down, if it's a digital scale, it's flashing red. If you're lucky enough to have one of those old school offices, you got that big metal bar that would click, 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 click. And you're like, no, you can move it back. And then the nurse moves it forward this way. So we have that fight in our office all the time. It's because I'm wearing boots. No. You take your shoes off. That's one of the things. Take the phone out your pocket. Yeah, you ain't lost but 2 pounds, fella. I'm sorry. So the thing is, once you get on that scale and we get you in the room and we start talking to you about, your chronic conditions, your high blood pressure, diabetes, X, Y, and Z, or you're there for your annual physical exam, and we look at something called the BMI, your body mass index. That's a measure of your height versus your weight. We're going to start talking about, well, Jim, your weight's a little bit above where it needs to be. Or if you got one of those doctors like you say, man, you got to lose some weight. It's easy for us to say you need to do a diet and you need to have exercise. Well, what does, eating a proper diet and what do you mean by exercise? But beyond that, what is that ultimate goal? What are you trying to do? That's what we need to get at. And that's what we as physicians are terrible at is trying to work with you, because this is a partnership. So we need to work with you to set that goal. And if your goal is to lose that dad bod, that midsection, there are a couple of things you need to do. One, the first thing is set a realistic goal. Because I'll have patients who come in and we'll sit and we'll talk and we're like, well, I need to lose 70 pounds. All right, that's great. Throw that out the window. Because if you tell me you're going to lose 70 pounds and you don't have a plan, you'll never lose 70 pounds. So what you have to do is you have to break that up into small, bite-sized, achievable chunks. And so that's where goal setting comes in. What am I going to do to get to that ultimate idea of what I want to do? But in the process of setting that goal, there are a couple ways that we need to get down there to losing that dad bod. First, nailing your diet. I can tell you, everybody I see in my office, oh, I eat healthy, I eat well. I don't eat this, this, and this. I had a couple patients do two things for me. Either write down what you ate or take a picture of what you ate. And then when they came back to the office after about 3 months and we went through the pictures, they saw exactly what they ate. And it's what you have in your head is totally different than what those pictures are going to show you. So diet, and I know we harp on that all the time, what you eat is a majority of what's stopping you from achieving that weight loss. A lot of folks will say, well, I only eat once a day. So if you only eat once a day and you're cramming 4,000 calories into, that period in which you're eating, then you're not doing yourself any good because you're in a cycle of one of those sort of fad diets. Additionally, you want to have some regular aerobic activity. So sure, everybody has limitations. It's 3,000 degrees outside. So I'm not going to advocate anybody go outside and start a running program. In terms of regular activity and aerobic activity, we want you to exercise on a consistent basis. I know everybody has busy schedules, trust me. But there are some things that we can do to get you to where you have a regular aerobic exercise. And lastly, strength training consistently. Because you can do aerobic activity, you can run 57,000 miles a day. If you don't increase or incorporate some muscle strength into that, you're increasing your aerobic capacity, the ability for your heart and your lungs to do increased work. But the calorie burn is going to come from when you increase that muscle mass. So that's where you have to incorporate some strength training consistently. And that doesn't mean you got to go in the gym and lift heavy. It also means we're not just going to do 12-ounce curls on the couch. So what about nutrition? We have to set a goal. One of the things is we tell you, again, you have to have a diet. So you hear all these fad diets. I'm going to do keto. I'm going to do intermittent fasting. I'm going to do Whole30, all these things. So some of these diets, while initially they will give you immediate sort of weight loss, but long term, it's just unsustainable because there's nobody I know they can just eat like this high protein, no carb diet and not fall off of it. So I haven't seen it where patients are able to tolerate that. A lot of the fad diets are too low in calories and too low in carbohydrates. So you can't cut all carbs out because carbs essentially give you the energy that you need. What you want to cut out are those simple carbohydrates like glucose and sucrose. Basically, the sugars that they put in those beverages is what you want to cut out. And then those fad diets, which means fading energy, they'll leave you sluggish and very irritable. What you want is a balanced diet. So food's balanced in nutrients. So I'm sure you guys have gone to some of the stations and you've seen all those stations that have talk about the nutrients in the vegetables, fruits, meats. You want to have some protein, some carbs, some fats. All of those are vital to your peak performance. The next thing is you want to follow an exercise plan that challenges the muscles. So you want to have something that you basically rotate through different exercises. So you don't want to do, chest and arms every time you go to the gym. Additionally, you also incorporate with nutrition, you want to have those foods high in carbohydrates. So you want to have grains, you want to have fresh fruits, vegetables, along with protein. So meats, poultry, fish, beans, and eggs. And you also want to choose some of the lower fat foods. So a lot of the foods that are processed have a tendency to have higher fats, a lot more salt. And then you want to do several meals throughout the day to support your training. So we typically think, oh, I'm going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So if you look at in nature the way sort of animals are, they typically graze throughout the day. So when you eat 3 meals a day, it's sort of a cyclical thing, and our bodies don't always follow that cycle. So the whole idea behind this, what's the goal? The goal is to get rid of the dad bod, to get rid of that midsection, to get rid of that extra weight, because my doctor said I have to lose weight. So again, my ultimate goal, 75 pounds of weight loss. How am I going to get to it? So I have to have steps. The first step is an achievable goal. Why don't I try and lose 1 or 2 pounds within the next 3 to 4 weeks? That should be achievable. So how do I get to moving more to lose that weight? First thing is you got to move more and sit less. So some of the recent studies have come out, and that sitting is almost as bad as smoking. If you look at what you do, if you're still working and you work and you sit at a computer, especially after COVID, you are sitting in that position for hours and hours and hours. Even if you have one of those fitness trackers that says, oh, time for you to stand up. You look at it, back on the computer. So you're sitting at a computer, sitting in front of a screen, eating, not moving. That's one of the worst things that you can do. You have to make sure that you are active and moving throughout the day. According to guidelines, you want to have moderate intensity exercise, a minimum of 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. Who has that much time? I guess nobody has that much time. So the idea is that you can stack that exercise. It's not all at one time. And we're going to talk about that weekend warrior, because how many folks in here wait till the end of the weekend? All right, now I'm going to hit the gym on Saturday and Sunday. I'm one of those guys. The idea is that you want to exercise of moderate intensity. How do I gauge moderate intensity? Basically, if I'm exercising and I can have a 2 to 3 word sentence come out, that's about a moderate level. So if you and your exercise buddy are working out and you can have a 2 to 3 word conversation, then you're at moderate intensity. You also want to incorporate some vigorous intensity, from 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous, intense exercise. So basically, that's like a 1 to 2 word sentence when you're exercising vigorously. Again, that is a total throughout the week. That is not a one-time session of 75 to 150 minutes, okay? And then muscle strengthening. 2 or more days a week of moderate or greater intensity involving all muscle groups, okay? So, depending on your age group, there's some of us who still, I don't want to say rage lift, but, you ego lift. You see the guy next to you lifting all this weight, you get up in there, all right, here we go. I'm going to deadlift this, and there went your back. And then you're not going to go to the gym for another 3 to 6 months, because you're going to be in my office every day talking about how your back hurts. Some of the things in terms of it, you want to know your limits and your physical abilities. I know now I have this $6 million man hip. I'm not running. There's 3 reasons why I'm going to run. There's $1 billion on the road, the zombie apocalypse has started, or the army says I got to run. That's the only 3 times I'm going to run. So I can still walk, I can still do other things. So I'm going to try and know my limits. So I'm not going to get out there and run, but I'm going to do what I can with the limitations I have. So if you have bad knees, you have bad shoulders, there are ways, if you talk to an exercise professional, to get around those limitations. You also want to do a multi-component physical activity. That includes balance training, aerobic activity, muscle strength training. So basically, you want to cross-train. Then determine your level of effort relative to your level of fitness. So if you hadn't gotten off the couch in 3 to 5 years, don't get out there and say, I'm going to go run the Louisiana Marathon, because I'm going to look at you at the finish line and be like, y'all call the ambulance, we got a problem. But in all seriousness, you want to make sure that you are doing what your body can handle. The only person to know what you can handle is you. And before you get started on an exercise program, especially one that's moderate to vigorous intensity, you want to make sure you check out with your primary care provider, or if you have a cardiologist, just to make sure it's safe. Because some conditions preclude you from exercising, and some conditions, unfortunately, will preclude or cause you to have sort of that dad bod. And then understand your chronic conditions. So if I've got hypertension, I'm on a medicine that regulates my heart rate, that can make it a little bit harder for me to get to that moderate to vigorous intensity level, because that medicine stops my heart from beating that fast. So there are ways, again, that we have to kind of work with you in terms of you setting the goal for that exercise. And then also, I know we harp on, hydration. I know everybody's seen the news lately with regards to how hot it is and how much fluid that, you need to take in. But first thing first, water is best. Everybody knows about Gatorade, Powerade, all these other supplements that are out there. Have you ever looked on the back of that bottle to see what the content is in there? There is a ton of sugar. And, if you aren't doing enough exercise to burn that off, you're just adding calories to that machine, thinking that, okay, I'm getting, sodium, potassium, all these other electrolytes I need, but you're also taking a whole bunch of sugar in. But the thing about hydration is that it's going to prevent dehydration, going to prevent you from cramps, and it's going to help with fatigue. Now, this table that you see off to the side here, that is on a regular ambient temperature day. That is not the surface of the sun that we have outside this building right now. But sports drinks after prolonged physical activity. So if over 30 minutes you're exercising, then you can start to add some of those sports hydration supplements. There are sports hydration supplements that are available that are sugar-free or reduced sugar. I always recommend those. The problem is that they have sugar substitutes, so those have their own problems with it. The thing about sports drinks are that they taste good, but again, you have to be careful of that sugar content. And then they can also improve performance, because after a 30-minute period, whatever sugars you had on board have burned, and then your body goes into a different type of burn. So you're going to need some of those carbohydrates. But in terms of trying to hydrate before exercise, you want to be hydrated and take in about 8 to 16 ounces 45 to 60 minutes before. So you want to drink before you start exercise so you're adequately hydrated. If you try to go out there and exercise and you aren't hydrated enough, that puts your muscles at risk for injuries, as well as having some problems with tolerating heat. During exercise, you want to drink 5 to 9 ounces every 15 to 20 minutes. So this, again, is if it's a normal day, not sort of the temperature you have outside. So you would end up essentially almost cutting that time frame in half. And then after exercise, if you knew what you weighed before exercise and you get on the scale and you've been exercising a lot, especially out in the heat, you want to get your weight back up to what it was before exercise. This is what we do whenever we're taking care of the athletes over at LSU and at Southern. They have a weight, they check their weight before practice, and we check their weight after practice. And you'd be surprised. We'll have anywhere from a 2 to a 5 pound weight shift from practice because they're sweating that much. And so then they actually have to try to rehydrate themselves back up to their pre-practice weight. And then in terms of avoiding injuries, you want to understand the risks of exercise. Again, we've decided I'm going to make this life change. I'm going to exercise. Okay. My goal for exercise is to lose 75 pounds. Okay. What's the time frame for that? How long are you going to give yourself? You need to have a reasonable time frame. 75 pounds is not going to fall off in 3 months. Okay. So you need to figure out a good time frame, and then from that time frame, you're going to set yourself a small achievable goal. Once you achieve that goal, give yourself a reward, and then move on to that next goal. That's what this is about, stacking on to that next goal. So in terms of achieving or working on our dad bods, one, you want to understand the risks of exercise. So each type of exercise has its own inherent risk. If I'm in the gym, I run the risk of having some sort of injury to a muscle, to a bone. if I'm outside running, again, I can have some sort of musculoskeletal risk. I can have a problem with the heat. And then choose the type of physical activity wisely. So you want to make sure that this is something that your body can tolerate. And then in terms of understanding the risks and choosing that activity, again, back to the health goal. What is my ultimate goal? And will this exercise activity help me achieve that? And then in terms of exercise, we don't go from 0 to 100. You have to gradually increase. So you'll see friends who have gone out, I'm going to pick on pickleball. They've been sedentary, they've been sitting on the couch, they've been doing what they do, they've kind of gained this weight, and then they say, oh, well, everybody's out playing pickleball. They put a new pickleball court. Well, if they haven't, sort of increased their activity, worked on stretching, some flexibility, they get out there, the first thing they do, they're going to turn and reach. There goes either my shoulder, my back, my knee, and here we are, you're back in my office. So you want to increase activity gradually over time. So you want to make sure that whatever you're going to do, you don't go from sitting on the couch to trying to run a 5K 8:30 in the morning in 90-degree heat. You've got to gradually work your way up to that. And then do you have the appropriate gear and equipment, depending on what it is that you're going to try and do. If it's going to be something that requires, say you're going to ride the bicycle, you want to make sure, especially here in Baton Rouge, you have a helmet. You may want to have elbow pads, knee pads, something like that in case of a fall. Or if you're going to use some other activity, make sure you have the appropriate gear that will ensure that you don't injure yourself. And then you want to choose a safe environment. Okay. I don't know if y'all have ridden on the streets of Baton Rouge, but riding a bicycle on the streets here is not the safest thing. I used to do triathlons before the hip. I've only been almost hit twice. In New Orleans, I got hit once. So make sure that the environment is safe. And then also in terms of if you're going to be, say, at a park, make sure it's well lit and things like that. So make sure that where you're choosing to exercise is good. And then obviously, check with your doctor before you get started on these exercise regimens. Just because if you have a chronic condition or you haven't been exercising regularly, we want to make sure that you're not putting yourself at risk. Because exercise, unfortunately, has hurt a few people in the past, And then things to consider in terms of exercise. And you want to engage in the exercise regularly, okay? Again, we talked about sort of the weekend warrior where, I'm going to fit everything in between Friday evening to Sunday afternoon. Rather than trying to do that, you want to try and break that activity up over the week. Don't forget to strength train, but don't ego lift. That means if you're at the gym and you see these young guys like just moving this massive amount of weight, yeah, you did that back several years ago. We ain't back in high school, we ain't back in college. Let's, do what you can do, okay? But don't hurt yourself trying to compete with the next person. The only person you need to be involved in competing with for now is yourself, okay? So make sure that the person you are today, the person that's there tomorrow is better than the person that was there yesterday. You also want to use proper form and watch your intensity. So you'll see a lot of people, I'm on exercise, I'm, doing whatever movement it is, let's say the deadlift, and you look into the gym, they're deadlifting, they're doing this. That form is going to get you back into the physician's office quicker than if you took the time and worked out with a lighter weight using proper form. The idea behind using proper form is that you don't injure yourself and you can achieve that ultimate goal of weight loss. And then you want to watch the intensity. You don't want to go up here when you need to be at a moderate intensity for the exercise. And then cross-train. So if you do some sort of cardiac activity, you also want to do some sort of weightlifting activity. And you also want to involve some flexibility in there as well. You want to invest in the right equipment. So if you're going to get out and say, well, look, I'm going to ride a bike, then you want to get the bike that appropriately fits you, one that can tolerate the environment that you're going to be riding on. Is it going to be a street surface? Is it going to be sort of off-road riding? And then if you feel pain, you might want to stop. Now, exercise doesn't necessarily feel good, but if it hurts, there's a sign. The reason we have pain receptors is to stop us from doing something that is, detrimental and not beneficial to us. And then after you exercise, you want to cool down and stretch. So you want to make sure that you maintain your flexibility. You want to make sure that you give your body adequate time to dissipate and repair itself after working out. And then, like I said before, are you a weekend warrior? Are you one of those people who only works out in one little chunk of time between Friday and Monday? Or if you're off during the week, between Tuesday and Thursday? Weekend warriors do not involve the single arm 12-ounce curl, or if you're one of those guys that you can do, 18, 16, 22 ounce. Yeah, you can do a whole lot of curls, but that's only going to get one arm strong. The problem is it's going to make the dad bod a little bit bigger. So what is a weekend warrior? That's someone who participates in physically strenuous activity only on the weekends. You wait and cram everything in to the weekend. People who are physically active, whether on weekends or more often, have lower mortality rates than inactive people. So I'm not saying if you're a weekend warrior, don't work out. So your chance of what they call all-cause mortality or reasons for dying are lower than someone who doesn't exercise at all. But people who tend to be weekend warriors or save their weekend or their workouts for just a surge or a chunk have a tendency to have more problems with injuries. So regular exercise versus only weekends. In terms of what we say is all-cause mortality or death because of inactivity, there's not a big difference between regular exercise and weekend warriors in terms of all-cause mortality, as long as you're getting the same overall amount of moderate to vigorous activity in the week. So your activity on that weekend or that chunk has to equal the same amount of activity that somebody who's working out 3 to 5 days during the week. Again, that also boils down to your goal setting. How, if I'm going to get to that, does my schedule allow me to work out that much? So what's one of the problems with being a weekend warrior or saving my exercise for the entire weekend is that, one, your body's designed for movement. So that sedentary, the worst thing I can do is have y'all all sitting down here for the next 30 or 45 minutes. Bodies are designed for movement. So your body is designed to be in sort of constant movement. Being sedentary all week long increases your susceptibility to injury by saving everything for the weekend. The problem is, by being inactive during the week, you aren't maintaining that flexibility, that mobility, and when you get out there and start trying to work out, you have a much stiffer or much more resistant muscles and joints as opposed to someone who's working out throughout the week. So you've made that choice. You've set the goal. You've decided, okay, I'm going to lose 75 pounds. I know this is my time frame, 8 months. I'm going to do 1.5 to 2 pounds on the first per week, the first 3 months. What should I do? Well, I talked to my doctor. I started this exercise program. I went to the health club. But I waited to do everything on the weekend, and I may have overdone it. So if you get to that point where you injure yourself, you may want to follow up with your primary care doctor or a sports medicine doc. You want to discuss what your goals are and listen to the treatment plan that they have involved for you. So whenever you come to see us, and what we try our best to do is to modify your activity. We don't try to shut you down, because if I shut you down, you're going to start all the way over. Okay? So I don't want to reset that clock. The thing I want to do is keep you in the game, but I just have to modify the way the rules are played. So we may take some time away from the activity that you're doing and modify it to a different activity. If we recommend that you see a physical therapist, you want to follow those instructions and do all those home exercises that they tell you to do. I didn't realize what it was like to have to do a home exercise program until I became a patient. It's a whole different ballgame when you're at the house having to do your own physical therapy. So make sure you try to follow their instructions, because those things will get you back to the condition you were in before you got injured. If you still don't improve, then more advanced care may be needed. So if you've seen your primary care doctor or sports guy, you've seen the physical therapist, you followed the program and you're still having problems, then there may be something more, and we may have to refer you to that next level of care. But what are some of the common injuries and common treatments? Who here has ever been injured when they were exercising? So I'm going to name, it's either going to be 4 areas. It's either going to be your shoulder, it's going to be your back, it's going to be your knees, or it's going to be your elbow. I'm going to throw ankle in there a little bit for knee and ankle. How many people have had back injuries because of exercise? Well, you can have a back injury just from falling asleep on the couch, but here we are. The dad bod doesn't help that a whole lot, but the back injuries occur a lot of times because, one, of our posture, two, because of our sort of sedentary lifestyle. Do I have any folks who play tennis or golf? Anybody? Nobody? How many of y'all have had elbow pain as a result of that? You know, those are often injuries, and a lot of those happen because of the repetitive motion. Okay, so some of the common injuries are going to be shoulder injuries. It's going to be strain. It's going to be some tears. The initial treatment, you can start this yourself. It's going to be rest, which is called active rest, which means you can still be active, just stay away from that particular motion that bothers you. You can take anti-inflammatory medications if they are safe with any medical conditions you have. Ice and activity modification, hamstring, quads, calves. Again, usually that occurs because they're stiff, you haven't stretched, you're out there, all right, let's get started. Then you have a problem. So rest, ice, when we say compression, that's going to be like an ACE bandage or one of those compression sleeves that you can get over the counter. You want to elevate it. So if you want to be in a position where you can lie down and elevate that extremity if it gets injured. So if you injure your quad or your hamstring, ice it down, lay down, elevate it. You want to do some gentle stretching, and you want to avoid any activities that will cause that muscle to give you pain. Tendons. Knees are a common complaint. As we get a little older, you have to worry about arthritis. Unfortunately, that's a thing. But a lot of people, if they say they're going to get into shape, they're going to start a walking program, they're going to start a running program, they're going to start biking, they're going to get an elliptical, and they're all going to start to have this pain in the front of their knees. Some of that has to do with sort of tightness of the quads and the hamstrings. Two is also the volume. So if you get started and you're like, all right, I'm going to start a walking program, getting up and walking an hour is a bit much. So if your end goal is to walk an hour long without being able to stop, you need to break that off into chunks, because all of a sudden going from 0 to putting all that stress on that joint is going to be a problem, and you're going to end up with an injury. It's called an overuse injury because you've overloaded that joint, and it's resulted in it becoming inflamed and irritated. And then low back pain. The thing about low back pain is that everything else I've told you, you can use ice on. If it's low back pain, typically we actually want you to put some heat on that low back. What that does is that increases the blood flow to that area, causes that muscle to try and relax and release. A lot of times those low back injuries will, although they suck and they hurt like a son of a gun, they will improve on their own. The question is, does it involve like a disc or a nerve? If you have shooting, radiating pain, it's the worst pain you ever had in your life, then you're going to want to see your physician or sports medicine specialist or physical therapist. But over time, with what we call active rest, you still becoming active, applying some heat, light stretching, anti-inflammatories, it should get better. If it doesn't, you get worse, I recommend you follow up with your doctor or orthopedist. And with that, question.